Picture this. You're standing in the Appalachian Mountains of eastern Kentucky on a cold December morning in 1997. The air is sharp, the hills are quiet, and a crowd of nearly 4,000 people has gathered around a pair of livestock trailers parked in a muddy field. On December 18, 1997, near the Knott-Perry County line, state officials flung open those trailer doors and released 7 elk into the woods, the first elk to set foot in eastern Kentucky in 150 years. The crowd went absolutely wild, and honestly, so did the elk. This is the story of one of the most jaw-dropping wildlife comebacks in American history. Buckle up, because this one goes from total wipeout to 10,000 strong, and the twist involves coal mines. Yes, coal mines. But before we get to the comeback, we have to talk about the collapse, because you can't appreciate the miracle of Chapter 2 without understanding just how catastrophically bad Chapter 1 ended. By 1850, the white-tailed deer was the only native large mammal that had not been wiped out of Kentucky. Bison, elk, black bear, mountain lion, timber wolf, and red wolf all succumbed to a brutal combination of overharvest and habitat destruction that left the state ecologically hollowed out. Eastern elk were native to Kentucky, but were eradicated by the 1880s due to habitat loss and unregulated hunting. Think about that. These are animals that had roamed these hills for thousands of years, and in a span of a few human generations, they were just gone, hunted out, squeezed out. Not a single one left. The Appalachian Mountains of Kentucky went silent in a way they hadn't been since the Ice Age, and they stayed silent for the better part of a century and a half. Now here's where the story starts to get interesting again, because silence eventually gets boring, even for wildlife managers. The late 20th century witnessed an increasing interest in returning elk to Kentucky. Supporters of a reintroduction effort noted that in addition to reestablishing a native species, a successful restoration would also provide increased opportunities for recreation and economic development. In other words, people wanted elk back, and not just for sentimental reasons. They wanted the whole package: the ecology, the tourism, the hunting heritage. The increased interest led the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources to conduct a habitat feasibility study and a series of public meetings in 1997 to determine the biological and sociological implications of restoring a free-ranging elk population. The results suggested that a Kentucky elk restoration project was viable. Science said yes. The public said yes. The only question left was, where do you actually find 1,500 elk on short notice? And that answer, my friends, required a road trip. Several road trips, actually, across half the country. Donor herds in 6 western states, Arizona, Kansas, North Dakota, New Mexico, Oregon, and Utah, were located, and elk capture began in December of 1997. After capture, all elk underwent disease testing and were prepared for release in Kentucky. At times, the whole operation involved trading Kentucky eastern wild turkey and striped bass to sweeten the deal with western state agencies. Yes, you read that right. Kentucky was out here doing wildlife swaps like some kind of very serious, very official Pokemon trade. You give us your elk, we give you our turkeys. Deal. The majority of the elk ultimately came from Utah, but getting the animals to Kentucky was just the beginning of the struggle, because what happened next nearly derailed the entire project before it ever got off the ground. Overall mortality in the first year of releases, 1998, hit 42%. 42%. Nearly half of the animals that had been captured, tested, trucked across the country, and released were dying. That is a brutal number. Biologists were alarmed. Critics were sharpening their "I told you so" speeches. The concern that disease would doom elk reintroduction in the Southeast, a fear that had already killed a similar effort in Alabama decades earlier, felt very, very real. The effort succeeded despite those concerns that disease would doom elk reintroduction in the Southeast. And here is the thing about a great comeback story: it always has a moment where it looks like it might not be a comeback story at all. This was that moment. But the program didn't collapse. It adapted. Biologists learned fast. Protocols improved, and the animals that survived began to do something remarkable. They started thriving. Mortality dropped from 42% in 1998 to just 4% in 1999. In 1 year, the turnaround was that dramatic. The herd had found its footing, literally and figuratively, in the Appalachian Hills. Now, here's the part of this story that nobody sees coming. The secret weapon behind the whole recovery wasn't some pristine national forest or untouched wilderness. It was coal mines. Reclaimed coal mine sites, which are plentiful in eastern Kentucky, offered an ideal habitat for elk. Think about what a reclaimed strip mine actually looks like. Long ridges of stone, wide open grassy plateaus, no dense forest canopy blocking the sunlight. As Kentucky's former elk program coordinator put it, Eastern Kentucky is where our mining industry is, and through that practice, it creates early successional habitat and grasslands, which is perfect for elk. The average elk eats roughly 40 pounds of vegetation each day, and farm owners were concerned about the animals destroying their crops. So the thousands of sparsely populated and undeveloped abandoned coal mine sites in eastern Kentucky offered the perfect habitat. The coal industry had scarred the land and accidentally built an elk paradise. You genuinely could not write a stranger plot twist. And now here comes the moment everything clicked, the number that proved this was no longer an experiment, but a genuine, irreversible comeback. In 2001, Kentucky established its first hunting season for elk. The first elk hunt was conducted in 2001. 6 bulls and 6 cows were harvested, with all hunters filling their permit. In wildlife management, opening a hunting season isn't a sign of failure, it's the ultimate sign of success. You only hunt a population that can sustain the pressure. Kentucky's long-dormant elk hunting heritage returned on October 6, 2001. Shortly after dawn that day, a Lexington resident took a bull elk in Perry County with a 20-yard shot from his muzzleloader. The bull was still wearing the ear tag placed on it in a Utah corral 4 years earlier. One animal, 2 states, one extraordinary journey. It was the first elk legally taken in Kentucky in 150 years, and it made national news. But even that moment, as cinematic as it was, turned out to be just the warm-up act for what was coming. Kentucky's elk population began to increase rapidly following the last stocking in 2002. By 2005, the herd estimate had climbed to almost 6,000. By 2007, almost 8,000. By 2010, the project goal of 10,000 animals was reached. 10,000 elk, from a starting point of 0 in 13 years. Initial telemetry studies found that Kentucky elk achieved a 90% breeding success rate and a 92% calf survival rate. The absence of predators, relatively mild winters, and abundant food sources contributed to the remarkable population growth and high body condition. The elk weren't just surviving in Kentucky, They were doing better than the western herds they came from. On average, Kentucky elk were 15% larger than elk found in western states. 15% larger. The Appalachians, it turns out, were feeding these animals extremely well, and the ripple effects went far beyond the animals themselves. Elk restoration has already helped revitalize the economy of eastern Kentucky. Local communities benefit via tourism, guiding services, and all of the other businesses associated with visitors, including restaurants, hotels, and sporting goods stores, totaling more than $5 million in economic impact each year. Active coal mines had started receding from the region in the 1990s and 2000s, and the towns built around them faced an economic vacuum with fewer jobs and deepening poverty. Many residents who could leave did, but the reclaimed mines remained, transforming previously uninhabitable mountains into something of a topographical patchwork quilt. And elk moved right into that patchwork. What the coal industry left behind, the elk turned into something alive again. The success of the elk restoration effort has even helped other states, including Wisconsin, Virginia, and Missouri, establish their own herds. Kentucky essentially became the blueprint for elk recovery in the entire eastern United States. Kentucky's elk herd is now larger than all the states east of the Mississippi River combined. Read that again. Combined. Every other eastern state with elk, add them all up, and Kentucky still has more. That is not a minor conservation win. That is a dominant, historic, jaw-dropping, ecological triumph. So where does this story stand right now in the summer of 2026? The Elk Restoration Zone covers 16 counties in the southeast region of the state, approximately 4.1 million acres. The current elk population is estimated at over 10,000 animals, confirmed by 2 different population models. The restoration zone encompasses more than 4.1 million acres of Appalachian terrain, mountains that were silent for 150 years, now echoing with bugling bulls every autumn. Guided elk tours depart before dawn from Jenny Wiley State Resort Park, the same area where those first 7 animals were released in 1997. Thousands of people now travel to eastern Kentucky every year specifically to watch elk, not to hunt them, just to watch them exist. That is how remarkable this has become. Here is the bottom line. This story started with total extinction and ended with the largest elk herd east of the Rocky Mountains. From 1997 through 2002, 1,541 elk were released into the Kentucky Elk Restoration Zone. That investment, those animals, that science, that cooperation between wildlife managers, coal companies, hunting organizations, and 6 western states paid off in a way that defies almost every expectation anyone had going in. The early mortality nearly sank the whole thing. The coal mines accidentally saved it. And now the Appalachian Mountains of eastern Kentucky are home to something that hasn't been true since Abraham Lincoln was a young man. A wild, free-roaming, self-sustaining elk herd that is not going anywhere. This is what wildlife restoration looks like when everybody shows up and does the work. It is messy, it is expensive, it almost fails. And then one day, you're standing on a reclaimed strip mine at sunrise watching a 700-pound bull elk materialize out of the fog. And you think, yeah, that was worth it. If you want more stories about the moments when humans actually get it right with wildlife, hit subscribe, because we've got plenty more where this came from. And if you know someone who thinks Kentucky is just horses and bourbon, send them this video. They are in for a surprise.